Hey guys, tonight we travel somewhere ancient, dusty, and suspiciously drafty. Imagine wandering into a forgotten hallway under your house and finding a trapdoor you swear wasn't there yesterday. Of course, then you open it, because what else do sleep-deprived overthinkers do at midnight? You descend, one creaky step at a time, into what smells exactly like a mix of old books and maybe mummified ambition. Good sign. You're in what appears to be a tomb, except the hieroglyphs on the walls are oddly sarcastic, and there's a faint glow coming from a pedestal at the center. On it lies a giant papyrus scroll, fluttering slightly as if breathing. So, before you get comfortable, take a moment to like the video and subscribe, but only if you genuinely enjoy what I do here. And drop a comment telling me where you're listening from and what time it is over there. Now, dim the lights, maybe turn on a fan for that soft background hum, and let's ease into tonight's journey together. You touched the scroll. You probably shouldn't have. But now you're falling backwards, through light and air and the unmistakable scent of overly oiled wigs. You land softly on a velvet cushion that smells like burnt incense and slightly regretful crocodile. A shadow looms over you. It's a librarian in flowing linen robes, unimpressed by your dramatic entrance. She eyes you like you just sneezed on the Rosetta Stone. "You're late," she says. The scrolls are waiting. You're in Alexandria, and it hasn't burned down. Yet. A massive rotunda rises above you, scrolls lining the walls and curling towers of papyrus. Some shelves stretch so high you swear the top is fogged over. You follow her, ducking between columns, stepping over lounging cats that seem to judge your literacy level. As you pass a wall-sized mural of Ra throwing shade at Thoth, literally there's a parasol involved, your guide explains that the library's greatest secret isn't the knowledge it holds. It's what it erases. Apparently, once a scroll is read here, its content fades from the world unless it's retold. And guess what? You're now a temporary scribe. Congrats, no dental. Why me, you ask? She shrugs. You opened the scroll, didn't you? Classic timeline meddler. You're handed your first scroll. It's labeled, "The Pharaoh Who Banned Sandals." A beat. You blink. She nods. Historians still debate whether it was a fashion statement or a personal vendetta against toe exposure, she explains. You unroll it. The ink shimmers faintly, images forming as you read. You see the young Pharaoh Sedeneth, obsessed with hygiene to the point he made every subject walk on tiny rugs laid out across the streets. There were entire jobs dedicated to rolling out linen paths wherever he went. One guard's entire career was holding an umbrella over the pharaoh's sandals, so dust spirits wouldn't enter through the straps. Meanwhile, a group of rebellious cobblers formed a secret society. Their motto? Toes for freedom. Their leader wore socks. Sacrilege. They met in a sand dune shaped suspiciously like a big toe. You can't help but chuckle. The cats around you purr louder. One flops into your lap. This is clearly a trap, but a cozy one. The librarian returns, holding a scroll even more dramatic in its golden casing. This one's spicy, she warns, banned from being read out loud after the last person developed uncontrollable giggles and couldn't stop for 3 days. You naturally read it anyway. It's about a failed attempt to create perfume for the gods using fermented ostrich eggs. The priest responsible was demoted to Keeper of Spoons, a role invented purely to humiliate him. But the scent, according to the scroll, still haunts certain temple corridors. It's been described as floral disappointment with a hint of regret. Your laugh echoes in the chamber. The librarian smirks. Told you. She waves her hand, and the scroll dissolves into shimmering dust, absorbed back into the mural. You're doing it. You're remembering, preserving. You sit a little straighter. A scribe. Not bad for a chronic overthinker with a questionable sleep schedule. Outside, the sun sets, or maybe rises, time's funny here. You feel the tug again, the scroll's magic preparing to pull you forward. But not yet. You look around once more. A statue of a baboon winks. Probably. A breeze whispers in from the rotunda dome. You breathe it in. History smells like papyrus, toasted sandalwood, and the very faintest hint of revolution. You're not alone, not here. The scrolls remember. And now, so do you. The fall is quieter this time. Like the scroll knows you're no longer flailing through time, but gliding. You land not with a thud, but a gentle bounce, as if the universe itself has become your emotional support trampoline. And then you hear it, the low, rhythmic clack of wood on stone. A train station. Except instead of announcements or pigeons plotting their next ambush, there's only Latin. Lots and lots of Latin. You're on a platform carved from marble lined with statues of vaguely disappointed senators. A sign reads, Roma Expressus, non refundabilis. Your librarian guide is gone, but in her place stands a tall Roman man in a lavender toga, holding a ticket with your name written in what looks suspiciously like Comic Sans. Ah, our guest from the age of scroll poking, he says. Welcome aboard. You're ushered into the train, which is less Hogwarts and more Emperor's Fever Dream. Corinthian columns instead of walls. Golden mosaics depicting surprisingly detailed food fights. And every seat? Reclining couches with tiny lion paw footrests. As the train chugs forward, yes, actual chugging, you spot the driver. A gray-bearded centurion sipping wine and mumbling about Caesar's obsession with calendars. Historians still debate, your togaed companion says as he pours you something that smells like rosemary and ancient sarcasm. Whether Julius Caesar reformed the calendar out of scientific curiosity or just to mess with astrologers. You sip. It's unsettlingly fizzy. He hands you a scroll titled, On the Emperor Who Banned Pointing. Again, you ask, why? He grins. To avoid blame. You read. The emperor in question, Minoris Obscurus, yes, really, believed that fingers directed intent. So all pointing was replaced with interpretive elbow waving. Whole cities learned to give directions using exaggerated shoulder shrugs and armpit nods. Markets became chaotic mime zones. One misunderstanding involving a goat, a baker, and 3 elbows nearly started a civil war. You laugh again, this time out loud, which earns you a delighted nod from a nearby senator who's inexplicably wearing bunny slippers. The train makes an unexpected stop. Station of Forgotten Triumphs, your guide announces. Short visit, don't lick anything. You step out into what feels like an eternal parade ground. Statues everywhere, but all half completed. Missing heads, arms holding invisible swords. Each plinth labeled something like Marcus the Maybe Brave or Lucilla, kinda important. Your guide whispers, these are the people who almost made it into history books. Nearly heroic, slightly revolutionary, the almost. One plaque reads, Titus the Timekeeper, introduced daylight savings, instantly banned. Another, Claudia the Chef, accidentally invented lasagna by stacking her mistakes. You stand before a statue with a slightly terrified expression. Its inscription reads, Cassius the Cautious. Didn't actually do anything, but did it very carefully. Back on the train, your guide hands you a small clay object. A travel relic, he says. Replica of the first Roman fork, or possibly a hairpin. Jury's still out. The train moves again, and outside the sun spins like a discus. You feel the soft hum of ancient momentum. Your eyelids droop, not from boredom, but the gentle weight of remembered absurdities. And in that moment, you think, history isn't carved in stone. It's doodled in the margins by exhausted scribes with strong opinions and questionable penmanship. The train slows. Next stop, something vaguely Greek. But for now, you recline. Your lion paw footrest feels oddly comforting, and the senator with bunny slippers snores in Latin beside you. You don't so much arrive as suddenly exist in a garden. Soft sun dapples through olive trees. Somewhere nearby, bees are making important philosophical decisions about which flower best represents the concept of being. The air smells like thyme, baked figs, and maybe just a hint of existential dread. You're lounging because apparently that's the only acceptable posture in ancient Greece, on a cushioned stone bench. Beside you sits a man in a robe so well pressed it defies physics. He has a beard that could win awards. Possibly already has. Aristotle, he says, nodding as if you two are about to casually invent Western thought together. You say nothing because you're still processing the fact that he just handed you a cup of wine with a tiny paper umbrella in it. Hydration in aesthetics, he explains. You sip cautiously. It's surprisingly coconutty. Aristotle leans in. Historians still debate, he says, whether Plato's real issue with democracy was ideological or just that he lost a student council election in his youth. You snort. He raises an eyebrow, pleased. The scroll you're given is shorter this time, entitled The Symposium That Accidentally Invented Charades. You read. It began innocently enough. A late summer gathering of philosophers, too much wine, and a new rule banning spoken answers to stimulate pure thought. Unfortunately, this resulted in Socrates miming the concept of justice using a fish, a sandal, and several unfortunate grapes. The game spread. Soon the whole city was engaged in philosophical charades. One baker gained notoriety for perfectly performing epistemological dilemma, using only a rolling pin and dramatic sighs. The evening culminated in a silent argument between two scholars involving 47 hand gestures, a dance, and a brief headstand. The outcome remains inconclusive. Back in the garden, Aristotle chuckles. The less they say, the more people believe them. Odd, isn't it? You nod sagely, pretending you didn't just eat a fig whole because it looked historically significant. He waves a hand, summoning what appears to be a snail with sandals on. Pet? You ask. Messenger, he replies. Fastest in the field, trained to deliver one message per week. You pet the snail anyway, it purrs. You're not going to question it. Just then, a chorus of toga-clad students bursts into the garden, arguing whether happiness is innate or if it can be achieved by perfecting the art of hummus. Aristotle sighs, rubs his temples, and mutters something about Plato's hummus paradox. Time for you to go, he says, standing. But here, take this. He hands you a small, perfectly round stone. It represents the universe, he explains. Or maybe it's just a nice rock. You decide. As the garden begins to fade, you catch a final glimpse of Aristotle trying to break up a Socratic debate by throwing olives. Your transition this time is smoother, like stepping between thoughts. The kind of gentle shift you feel right before sleep takes you. You hold the stone in your hand, still warm. And in your mind, a voice whispers, even the wisest man occasionally steps on a rake. You land with a soft thud onto cobblestones that smell suspiciously of five-spice powder and existential commerce. Around you, silk banners, porcelain stalls, incense spiraling through lantern-lit air. A dragon dance just ended, or began, and the music is suspiciously funky for the Tang Dynasty. Welcome to the morning market of Chang'an, 8th century. Population, 1 million citizens and one very confused time traveler. Someone hands you a skewer of candied hawthorn. You accept without question. You're learning. "Move it, scholar," a vendor shouts, nearly bowling you over with a cart stacked entirely with scrolls labeled mostly accurate maps and kinda trustworthy star charts. Your guide this time is a young girl no taller than your shoulder, wielding a fan larger than her torso. "You look like someone who doesn't know what King Wen means," she says flatly, then takes your hand. "Let's go." She whisks you past acrobats, perfumers, painters offering soul portraits, and a scholar furiously debating a goose. You try not to interrupt. As you duck under a sign advertising noodles of philosophical length, she hands you a scroll titled, "The Emperor Who Declared Tuesdays Illegal." You pause. "What?" She nods. "He stubbed his toe. On a Tuesday, and that was that." You read, "Emperor Li Huan of the Lesser Tang court decided, after a particularly unfortunate Tuesday involving a shoehorn and a disgruntled astrologer, that Tuesdays brought disharmony. For the rest of his reign, the week had only 6 days. Calendars were redrawn. Historians had meltdowns. One monk locked himself in a cave for 30 years to wait until Tuesday returned. Spoiler, it didn't. Meanwhile, Black Market Tuesdays began circulating in secret. Underground poetry readings, shadow dumpling deals, hidden tea ceremonies labeled definitely not Tuesday." The girl waves a fan over your face. "Breathe, you're turning red. That's too much century at once." You sit on a step beside a calligrapher who's drawing philosophical insults in gold ink. One reads, "Your key is as unbalanced as a 3-legged goat. You consider commissioning one for your email signature." She points to a mural of a bureaucrat wrestling a calendar. Historians still debate whether it was satire or prophecy. A rooster strolls past wearing silk booties. You decide not to ask. You're handed a tiny jar labeled Night Breeze Essence. When opened, it smells like nostalgia and mothballs. "It keeps the anxiety away," she says, "or causes lucid dreams." Mixed reviews. She pulls you toward a courtyard garden where scholars debate under peach trees and an opera singer practices high notes that rattle your spine. One tree's fruit is rumored to grant perfect sleep, but only if eaten while reciting tax codes from the Sui dynasty. You try anyway. Peach. Excellent. Tax code. A tongue twister involving oxen and bridge tolls. As the market fades, your guide bows. "Sleep well," she says, "and don't trust any day that doesn't start with T." You're falling again, through silk, spice, and the sound of flutes, and in your hand, one perfect peach pit. Still warm. Your next landing is a bit oily. You're in a kitchen. Not just any kitchen. This one smells of roasted game, burnt rosemary, and the faint desperation of underpaid apprentices. The walls are stone, the ceiling arched, and the atmosphere somewhere between gourmet fantasy and medieval survival challenge. Welcome to the royal kitchen of the Tudor court. Circa 1543. A man in a gravy-stained ruff turns toward you, holding what appears to be a spoon carved from a unicorn horn. "You must be the new assistant," he says, absolutely confident that you're qualified. You nod, always nod. He tosses you a scroll titled "Soup for the King and His Enemies." Before you open it, someone yells, "Duck!" And a live duck skitters across the floor wearing a hat. It's unclear if the command was meant literally or if the duck is late for rehearsal. You read, apparently King Henry VIII once demanded a dish so unique, so unlike anything any other monarch had ever tasted, that his head chef invented soup of 7 luxuries. Ingredients included rosewater, powdered emeralds, mashed eel, and a suspiciously green foam called herbal fluff. Historians still debate, the chef beside you murmurs while grinding what smells like medieval regret. Whether the emeralds were real or just dyed pebbles from Yorkshire. You're handed a ladle the size of a toddler and told to stir. The pot contains something. You think you spot a pearl, possibly an eyeball. As you stir, a voice behind you mutters, "This isn't the chicken stock, is it?" No one answers. That's probably for the best. You're introduced to the spice master who's memorized 400 different types of pepper and believes paprika is a hoax. He sneezes with the force of a minor earthquake and then bows politely. In a far corner, a junior cook is trying to carve potatoes into the shape of Henry's 6 wives. You silently applaud his optimism. Suddenly, an alarm bell rings. "It's the pudding duel," someone shouts. You're rushed into a courtyard where 2 nobles are fencing with congealed custard rods. The chef sighs. "Every Tuesday." You sit beside the royal taster who gives you a half wink and a full look of trauma. Survived 38 meals. Odds are thinning. Back in the kitchen, your soup is finished. A footman rushes it away under a silver dome, leaving you alone with a bowl of leftover experimental broth. You taste it. It's not bad, if you ignore the crunchy part. As the kitchen fades, the chef tosses you a small pouch. "Take this. Spices for sleeping. 1 sniff before bed. Might dream of swans or tax audits?" You're falling again, this time through steam, laughter, and the sound of 17 spoons hitting stone floors. And somewhere in your pocket, 1 peppercorn that pulses with suspicious warmth. This time you land on something soft. Then it growls. You roll off quickly, finding yourself inside a massive circular tent, its interior glowing gold and smelling faintly of yak butter, leather, and unspoken grudges. Giant rugs cover the floor and embroidered banners sway gently above you. Outside hooves pound rhythmically like a lullaby written by a war drum. You were in a Mongol military camp, specifically the Kashig encampment of Genghis Khan. A young soldier notices you and tosses you a thick coat lined with fur and what might be questionable decision-making. "You're not freezing. That's suspicious," he mutters. You're led to the central fire where a low table is being set with a meal best described as aggressively fermented. "Welcome to the Khan's winter campaign," says a voice behind you. An older man with more scars than teeth places a scroll in your hand. It reads, "How the Mongols invented heated pajamas." You raise an eyebrow. He shrugs. "Trade secret." You read. During one particularly brutal winter siege, the army quartermasters, desperate to keep morale and toes intact, invented fire quilts. Blankets lined with hot stones wrapped in felt, inserted via a clever sleeve system. Soldiers slept in shared yurts heated by a combination of these blankets, body heat, and aggressive spooning hierarchies. Historians still debate, your scarred companion says while stirring a pot of fermented mare's milk soup. Whether this led to the birth of Mongolian jazz, it involved throat singing and snoring in harmony. A horse pokes its head into the tent and sighs loudly. You're told his name is Bak, and he thinks he's reincarnated from a Persian librarian. No one argues. You're handed a bowl of steaming stew and a fur-lined sleeping hat, shaped like a bear's head. "For intimidation," they explain. You do not feel intimidating. You feel like a cartoon character from the coldest bedtime story. Night falls outside fast and deep. The tent glows with low candlelight, casting shadows that dance like ancient runes. You lie back on a mound of wool, half listening to the soldiers play a game involving carved bones and long, dramatic groans of victory. One younger soldier pulls a lute from his saddlebag and starts singing a lullaby about arrows, betrayal, and dumplings. It slaps harder than expected. The stew warms your stomach. The hat warms your scalp. The fire warms your soul. The air is dry, clean, and oddly musical. A final scroll is passed your way before sleep creeps in. It's a quote. To conquer the world, one must first conquer the chill beneath their feet. You nod, not because it makes perfect sense, but because it feels like something worth remembering. And as the dream begins to pull you forward again, back the librarian horse snorts meaningfully at you. You whisper, "I'll write it down." He neighs. A deal is struck. You wake up mid-parade. Confetti, well, shredded papyrus, is raining from the sky. Trumpets blare, drums pound. Someone's tossing tiny cakes into the crowd and shouting, "Long live the theoretical!" You're swept into the celebration like a confused guest at a surprise party you didn't RSVP to. Welcome to the final festival of the Kingdom of Arevele. A civilization history forgot, but clearly went out with style. You're handed a sash reading "Official Witness" and a scroll with a title that makes you pause. The celebration of being slightly above average. As you walk through the jubilant streets, banners wave with slogans like "Good enough is great" and "We tried and that's what counts." The royal family rides past on miniature elephants wearing monocles. One winks at you. You read. The Kingdom of Arevele, located somewhere between two rivers and several diplomatic misunderstandings, held an annual festival not to honor great warriors or discoveries, but to celebrate adequate efforts. Farmers who planted in straight lines, poets who rhymed at least 3 times, bakers who didn't burn half their bread. Historians still debate, says a woman juggling scrolls while riding a llama, whether this kingdom truly existed, or if it was just a metaphor invented by a very tired philosopher. You stop by a booth offering lukewarm soup of modest ambition. It tastes like average Tuesday with a hint of thyme. Nearby, a stage hosts the royal debate. Should socks match? One philosopher argues never, citing creative freedom. The other wears 10 identical pairs and refuses to speak, letting symmetry make his case. You're ushered into a tent of mirrors, each one reflecting you in a slightly better or worse outfit. A child tugs your sleeve and hands you a ribbon. Best time traveler in this tent. You consider framing it. The queen approaches. She's wearing a crown of gently blinking fireflies and sipping something from a cup shaped like a platypus. "We're disappearing," she says, "but that's okay. Everyone forgets something." She gives you a box. Inside, a snow globe of the entire city, its buildings midwave. "Shake it when you forget who you are," she whispers. "Or just when you need mediocre soup." As the music fades, the last of the confetti falls. You're pulled again, this time not falling, but floating, buoyed by the collective shrug of a civilization that knew it didn't have to be remembered to have mattered. And in your hand, one snow globe. It sparkles. Quietly, you land in a workshop full of lenses. Sunlight slices through glass panels above you, scattering rainbows on scrolls, half-finished telescopes, and something that might be a hamster-powered orrery. A man is standing on a stool, arguing passionately with a potted plant. "Galileo?" you ask, already regretting it. He turns, beaming. "Ah, another assistant sent by the moon herself. You're late, but that's expected. Time bends near genius." He hands you a magnifying glass and a scroll titled, "The moon is definitely not smiling, probably." You read. Apparently during a particularly sleepless month, Galileo developed a theory that the moon had moods. Not tidal influences or reflective properties, actual emotions. His evidence? Craters that looked suspiciously like sulking. He tried to photograph it smiling using a device made from wine bottles and hope. Results were inconclusive, but he did accidentally invent the kaleidoscope. Historians still debate, Galileo mutters while gluing mirrors to a turtle shell, whether this was a genuine belief or a clever ruse to dodge censorship. You follow him into a room labeled Experiments Too Ridiculous to Fail. Inside, models of flying shoes, a map of hidden planets only visible during naps, and an elaborate musical scale based on cheese firmness. You don't ask, you've learned. At one point, a chicken runs across the floor with a scroll strapped to its leg. Galileo shouts, "Ah!" That's the thesis on Jupiter's jealousy. Get her! You chase the chicken, it's very smug. Eventually, you end up in the observatory tower. Galileo invites you to look through a lens he claims shows not the stars, but what the stars think about you. You peer in. You see yourself peacefully asleep, surrounded by floating constellations humming lullabies. It's oddly moving. He hands you a small telescope that folds into a coin. For looking inward, he says, or peering under cabinets. As the sky outside shifts from day to night in a blink, Galileo climbs onto a stack of books and declares, "I may not have discovered the universe, but I definitely annoyed it into acknowledging me." Lightning flashes, probably just for dramatic effect. You're lifted again, not by wind or scroll, but by the upward pressure of too many questions asked all at once. And in your hand, the telescope coin. Cool, quiet, comforting. You drop into velvet, specifically a velvet armchair, large enough to host a committee meeting and possibly a duel. Around you, wigs, so many wigs. Some on heads, some in boxes, one on a candelabra that clearly wasn't designed for it. You're in a parlor. No, wait. A salon, circa 18th century France. And from the energy in the room, it's less afternoon tea and more passive-aggressive legislation. A powdered noble hands you a biscuit shaped like a guillotine. "Welcome to the Assembly of Indecision," he says. "We debate, we don't act. It's tradition." He hands you a scroll, the law passed entirely by dessert. You raise an eyebrow. He nods solemnly. You read. In the year 1783, during an especially tense council session, the issue of tax reform became so heated that members refused to vote. Instead, a bored pâtissier offered eclairs with colored frosting, red for yes, blue for no. The vote was counted based on empty trays. Red won. The law passed. Historians still debate. The noble continues while sipping a drink that smells like rebellion and brandy. Whether it was democratic innovation or indigestion-driven mistake. The room is a blur of ribbons, monocles, and thinly veiled sarcasm. One gentleman refuses to sit, citing political symbolism. Another has trained his dog to bark only at fiscal conservatives. A woman in lace recites a sonnet that critiques trade tariffs using metaphors about cheese. You applaud. She curtsies. You both understand this is performance art. Suddenly, the doors fly open and a group of masked violinists enter, playing something that sounds like Vivaldi having a nervous breakdown. Applause erupts. Someone faints out of sheer aesthetic overload. You're pulled aside by a footman. Time to observe the secret ritual, he whispers. You're led to a hidden alcove where nobles vote on who wore the best cravat using only eyebrow raises and subtle throat clearing. The system is shockingly efficient. One wig walks by on its own, no one reacts. Back at the parlor, you're handed a spoon and invited to join the final discussion of the evening. Can one legislate happiness? The biscuit you nibble says, maybe. The candles flicker low. Powder floats like ancient pollen. The music softens. Someone yawns behind a fan. You blink. The parlor fades, not dramatically, but like a conversation that ended mid-joke. In your pocket, a sugar sculpture shaped like liberty beginning to melt. Sweet, delicate, and completely unreasonable, your feet splash down. Warm water swirls around your ankles, perfumed with oils and herbs. You're barefoot in a vast Roman bath, marble columns rising like pillars of forgotten gym memberships. Steam curls up from the pools, mingling with the scent of eucalyptus, gossip, and sandal polish. "Welcome to the Thermae Maximus," says a man reclining on a floating tray of fruit. "We bathe, we brag, we exfoliate our regrets." He gestures to a wooden plank stacked with towels, olives, and a scroll labeled, "The Debate That Lasted 3 Soaks." You already know what's coming. You read. In 112 CE, a philosophical debate at the baths of Caracalla grew so intense, no one left for 3 days. The topic: whether soap or sand was the superior cleansing agent. Supporters of each built towel forts and issued rhetorical pamphlets. One group developed bath-friendly togas, the other invented scented grit bombs. No clear winner emerged, but the soap side smelled slightly better. Historians still debate, your host says while peeling a grape with shocking efficiency, whether this was a hygiene revolution or just the empire's most passive-aggressive pool party. You wade deeper into the main chamber, passing sections labeled Debates and Deep Cleansing, Lukewarm Philosophy, and Political Steam. A trio of senators is arguing over aqueduct funding while exfoliating with sea salt. You're invited to the Whisper Pool, where secrets are shared in tones so soft, even the steam blushes. One man leans in and murmurs, "The emperor's hair is not naturally curly. The ripple that follows could start a civil war." A bath attendant offers you a custom lotion named Victory of the Calves. You accept. It smells like laurels, modest triumph, and overconfidence. You float for a while, staring at a fresco of Poseidon using a loofah. It's oddly inspiring. Someone starts playing a reed flute. Another adds gentle harp. A woman hums. Suddenly, you're in a symphony of semi-nude serenity. You dry off with a towel so soft it may be illegal. Before leaving, your host hands you a tiny amphora filled with bathwater from the reflective pool. Rumored to remember your best idea and whisper it back when you need it most. As the steam thickens, the marble fades, and your feet touch solid ground again. Bare, clean, and slightly pruny. In your hand, the amphora humming faintly. Maybe it's proud of you. You blink and instantly regret it. A spotlight hits your face. Drums pound. Silk rustles. Welcome to backstage Edo-era Japan, and someone just shoved a puppet into your arms. You're standing in a dim theater lit by lanterns and tension. Shadowy figures move silently behind a rice paper screen. You hear flute music. You feel panic. "Go!" someone whispers, shoving you forward. You stumble into the light, your puppet, a kimono-clad noblewoman with extremely judgmental eyebrows, now center stage. A whisper tickles your ear. Just follow the script. You're handed a scroll titled, "The Romance That Toppled a Puppet Government." You read. In the late 1700s, a famed Bunraku troupe accidentally sparked a political crisis when one of their puppet plays, meant as a satire of courtly romance, included a character too eerily similar to a real shogunate official. Audiences wept, officials panicked, censors demanded edits, the troupe added more puppets. The audience only cried harder. Historians still debate, a stagehand mutters while gluing tassels to a warrior's sandal, whether the downfall was caused by the script or the love triangle between 2 puppets and a stage prop. On stage, your co-performer, a fishmonger puppet named Taro, lets out a dramatic sigh. You follow suit, wobbling your puppet toward the next cue. Applause ripples through the audience. Someone throws rice. Backstage, you meet the puppet master. He's wearing 10 rings and speaks only in haiku. Drama lives in string, he says, sipping tea. Even dolls have dreams. Yours is sleeping well. He bows, then vanishes behind a curtain made of whispers. You're guided to the costume room where puppets hang like very quiet celebrities. One wears a tiny sword labeled emotionally unavailable samurai. Another has a scroll attached to its back. Mildly cursed merchant, do not wash. A makeup artist dabs something fragrant on your puppet. Smells like longing, she explains. Very popular. You're handed a fan, a prop moon, and a note. Use at climax. You're not sure what climax, but your puppet seems ready. The final scene plays. The noblewoman reconciles with Taro beneath a cherry blossom made of paper and patience. The curtain falls. Silence. Then a wave of gentle clapping, like rain politely applauding itself. You bow. The puppet master reappears, placing a tiny folding screen in your hand. For dreams, he says. To divide noise from peace. The theater fades. You're alone again, but not quite. In your palm, the miniature screen unfolds silently. A scene appears, your puppet, sleeping. She earned it. You land face first in snow. Not just any snow. Snow that crunches like freeze-dried secrets and smells faintly of smoked fish and beard oil. You brush yourself off to find an icy wind slicing through the fjord like a cold-blooded accountant. Congratulations! You're in a Viking village, and not during a raid or feast. This is their downtime. A bearded figure approaches, wrapped in so many layers he looks like a woolen cabbage. You're the new map keeper? He asks. You nod. Because at this point, why not? He slaps a scroll into your arms, the treasure map written on fish skin. You read. The legendary Jarl Snorri One-Ear commissioned a map said to lead to the resting place of the Quiet Axe, a weapon so unimpressive it was forgotten in every saga. The catch? The map was drawn with squid ink on dried cod skin, and over time the details warped with every change in humidity. Historians still debate whether the treasure was ever real, or just a fermented joke played on future generations by particularly bored Vikings. You follow your new guide through snowdrifts toward a longhouse filled with the smell of stew and unspoken grudges. Inside, old warriors sit carving spoons and loudly denying they ever screamed during battle. You're handed a mug of something hot and suspicious. It tastes like berry regret and a whisper of goat. A boy approaches with a folded fish skin. We think it says north of the loud rock, or maybe beneath the angry bird. It's unclear. You're brought to the map room, aka a shelf where 28 different versions of the same map are pinned, all contradictory and one drawn by a sheep. That one's oddly accurate. Your task, overlay them like a jigsaw of confusion and hope for pattern recognition. You spot it. All routes intersect at one strange hill shaped like a sock. The villagers cheer. The Sock Hill, someone yells. Of course! You set out on a sled powered by unusually enthusiastic goats. The hill yields a small chest. Inside, a single iron spoon engraved with "Nice try." The villagers declare victory anyway. There's a celebration. Someone composes a ballad titled "The Spoon of Destiny." It's very short. Later that night, the mapkeeper hands you a charm. A tiny carved runestone that glows faintly when you're close to sarcasm. As the fire crackles, snow falls, and horns clink gently, you feel the warmth of people who celebrate even almost wins. The longhouse fades into the flurry, and in your coat pocket, one glowing stone, smirking slightly. You blink into velvet darkness. Not the scary kind. More like the kind found inside a very expensive jewelry box or a nap theater. Then, a spotlight. A gasp. A sneeze that echoes dramatically. You're seated in the front row of an opera house in Renaissance Italy. and someone just handed you a monocle. You adjust it instinctively because that's what the person next to you, a man with a hat shaped like a question mark, did. He nods solemnly. Prepare yourself. This one's 9 hours long. The curtain rises. A soprano begins singing what sounds like a weather report with passion. A scroll slides into your lap. The usher whispers, "Your cue." It's titled, "The Opera That Accidentally Predicted the Future Poorly." You read, in 1512, the maestro Girolamo Noto composed a sprawling opera about a future city in the sky, powered by screaming birds and governed by singing robots. Unfortunately, every prediction was wildly off, except the part where people wore increasingly ridiculous pants. That part was eerily accurate. The opera was banned after one noble interpreted Act 3's dream sequence as a critique of his mustache. Historians still debate, the usher says between servings of tiny fruit on toothpicks, whether the maestro was visionary or just suffering from pasta-induced hallucinations. On stage, a baritone challenges a chandelier to a duel. The woman beside you fans herself with her program, which doubles as a bingo card. You'll cry in Act 7. Everyone does. It's the bit with the egg. You don't ask, you wait. An intermission arrives around hour 4. You're herded into a side room called the Whispering Hall, where patrons complain quietly in iambic pentameter. Back in your seat, a child hands you opera glasses made from hollowed-out olives. You look through and everything seems slightly more tragic. Even the bassoonist's posture. Act 7 arrives. The egg sings. You cry. You don't know why. By curtain fall, the cast is sobbing. The conductor is conducting with a baguette, and the audience erupts into gentle applause that sounds like hope being exhaled. As you rise, the usher slips something into your hand. A miniature scroll. For when you can't sleep, he says. It hums the libretto softly. You walk out beneath a chandelier shaped like a teardrop in midair. And in your pocket, the tiny scroll, humming, off-key but comfortingly familiar. You arrive in a room full of whispers. Not actual voices. Paper. Pages fluttering. Pens scratching. Teacups clinking like porcelain punctuation. Welcome to a reading salon in Victorian England, where the tea is judgmental and the novels have more footnotes than plot. You're seated on an aggressively embroidered chair, already handed a book the size of a sofa cushion. A sign on the wall reads, Volume 12 of Mostly Thoughts, Rarely Dialogue. Someone clears their throat politely. You've arrived just in time, says a woman in a bonnet that could shade a village. We've reached the chapter where no one does anything for 17 pages. She hands you a scroll, The Book Club That Never Finished a Book, you read. In 1846, the Finchley Society for the Literary Enrichment of Gentle Persons formed with a noble goal, to read and discuss one novel a month. By the third meeting, they were still arguing over the title of Chapter 1. By the 12th, they'd appointed a chairperson whose only job was to enforce psi moderation. Eventually, meetings focused entirely on theorizing what the ending might be, based solely on the author's haircut and punctuation usage. Historians still debate, says the bonneted woman while buttering a crumpet with alarming precision, whether the society was a satire, a cult, or a cleverly disguised nap club. A man in the corner is reading while upside down, claiming it brings fresh perspective. Another is cross-referencing the novel with his dreams and has made a chart involving hedgehogs. You're invited to read aloud. You do. A paragraph with 6 semicolons and 3 metaphors for longing. Applause follows. Someone weeps gently into a saucer. Then it's time for the ritual of ending without ending. A group sigh, a dramatic closing of books, and synchronized murmurs of, "We shall continue." Next fortnight. You're handed a bookmark shaped like an unfinished sentence. As the salon dims and lace fades into shadows, the woman touches your arm. "Take this," she says. It marks pages you never quite finished, but always meant to return to. And in your hand, the bookmark. It glows softly when near unanswered questions. You leave with the strange comfort that not everything needs closure to matter. You're standing in a quiet room that looks a lot like your own. If your own room had better lighting and smelled faintly of pine and maybe nostalgia. A desk, a chair, a sealed envelope with your name written in a handwriting that's definitely not yours unless you've been secretly studying elegant penmanship in your sleep. You open it. The parchment crackles like old thoughts. The heading reads, "A letter you wrote tomorrow." You read, "Hey, you've been traveling. Not just through history, but through the parts of your brain that remember curiosity, oddness, and laughing at things that don't make sense but also somehow do. You've sat with emperors and opera eggs. You've worn bear hats and voted with eclairs. That wasn't random. That was remembering." A small desk clock ticks once, loudly. The letter continues. "You've always carried this, the impulse to understand things deeply, even while you're falling asleep, especially then. Because sleep isn't just rest, it's surrender. And surrender for someone like you is terrifying." You pause, blinking. The envelope shifts in your fingers, warm now. The letter goes on. "Tonight, let go. Of finishing the thought. Of being interesting. Of doing. You've gathered scrolls, stones, bookmarks, spoons, maps, and miniature stages. Each one is ridiculous. Each one is real." Your eyes scan the last lines. The library remembers. The steam still hums. The puppet bows. The spoon points north. The moon forgives your questions. You look around. On the desk, all your collected tokens, each from a place you've been or dreamed or needed, rest quietly. None glow now. They don't have to. You lie down. Not because you're tired, but because finally you can be. Outside wind presses against the window softly, as if saying, "We'll keep watch." Your eyes close. Nothing extraordinary happens, except everything. The room stills. Everything slows, not like falling, but like floating. The kind of drift that carries leaves across a lake at dusk, when the sky's more memory than color. Time forgets itself. Sound becomes hush. You're not quite awake, not quite dreaming, and that's exactly the point. The tokens you've gathered, odd, warm, tiny anchors to absurdity and truth, begin to fade. Not vanish. Just soften. Like breath on a mirror. They've done their job. You don't need them to sleep. You needed them to feel that you were never alone in your wandering. You hear laughter, not loud, just a trace. Somewhere, someone's finishing a song about spoons. Somewhere else, a puppet is napping mid-scene. The world spins on, full of unfinished pages, fermented soup, and whispered opera. And it's okay. You've traveled across time, not to escape, but to arrive. To arrive in this moment, this breath, this steady heartbeat against the hush. Let the page stay open. Let the candle burn low. You don't need to understand everything tonight. You just need to rest. Close your eyes, gentle traveler. Let go of the string. The stars can wait.